Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. Hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. Today, we are talking about another open world game set in Japan. This time, it's Ghost of Tsushima. Came out in 2020. I have a great deal of nostalgia for this game, despite how recently it came out, for a reason I'll get into later in this video. But admittedly, this is a retro rebound spirited video, but the timing just felt right to sit down and talk about Ghost of Tsushima. We did a similar thing after Veilguard. I did my review, and then I sat down with Origins and just kind of compared and contrasted the two experiences and what I liked more in the case of Origins compared to Veilguard, when I'm hoping, if Dragon Age does continue on, that they do when they go back to the drawing board. Same thing here. Like, we've been waiting forever for a Japan-focused Assassin's Creed game, and I kind of got that fixed when Ghost of Tsushima came out. And my editor, Dan, used a great term. It kind of felt like Ubisoft had their lunch eaten, pretty much. And so I just wanted to talk about Ghost of Tsushima in greater detail. It was a game that, leading into its release, I made a video saying I was very skeptical about it, because I was like, this just looks like another Ubisoft open world game. You're telling me the creators of Sly Cooper and Infamous are suddenly just doing this sort of pretty generic structured open world? Come on now, we don't need to do that. But then I played it and I was like, yo, the guiding wind, yo, the style, the visuals, the open world objectives, there's so much about this that is fantastic. And so I wanted to talk about it here today. So if you end up liking this style of video, just to be very clear, because I know sometimes the conversations here get critical and very serious, if you just like a dude loving on games, Retro Rebound is your place. It is a very big channel that we run multiple videos a week on, and it's literally just about the things I love. So go ahead and check that out if you like this type of content. But nonetheless, I just want to talk about Ghost of Tsushima after playing about 15 hours of Assassin's Creed Shadows. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here, you're into whatever the hell we're doing here, consider subscribing. So, Ghost of Tsushima, going back to this was really interesting because in my Assassin's Creed Shadows impressions video, I tried to make it a great effort to get away from the comparison game. I think a lot of reviewers, myself especially, fall victim to the comparison game of like, it's basically this, and that. Like, I described Indiana Jones as Dishonored meets Indy, and it's like that paints a picture in your head, but I think the critique and the kind of breakdown of things needs to be a little bit deeper than that. But sometimes the comparisons are warranted, especially in a almost one-to-one example like Shadows versus Ghost of Tsushima. But the moment I did break that rule for that impressions piece was to talk about the open world design of Ghost of Tsushima versus Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, when I was playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, I think visually it's a stunning game. Like, if you kind of look at these side by side, I think the main thing that Ghost of Tsushima manages to accomplish that Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't is just the moving foliage on screen, the way the light cuts through the woods, the vibrancy of the environments. Like, there are those little artistic decisions that make these two worlds both look really good, but in different ways. However, I do have a slight preference toward what Ghost of Tsushima does, because it always feels like I'm watching like an amazing samurai movie or something like that. And honestly, I don't think Ubisoft really misses on their world design. Like, I always enjoyed being in the worlds, especially of Assassin's Creed, but also like Far Cry is pretty good. Sometimes Ubisoft is a bit guilty of the window shopping feel in their open worlds, and I don't think that Tsushima gets away from that either. There's still a little bit of waypoint chasing. But what I love most about Tsushima, and this was like a new feature they added where you could just like replay activity. So I was able to re-experience a lot of the open world beats again in my completed save file. By the way, the only game I can run around in a Sly Cooper outfit and take out Mongols, that is awesome. But when it came to Ghost of Tsushima, as I was running through all these bases again, I was remembering what really works for this game is because every location is named differently, there's not really a template. Like, you have your Mongol camps, and you're generally going to be assigned to go around and kill them all, but then maybe there's a bonus you get if you, say, kill some of them with sticky bombs, or you take them out from above, or you deliver a critical hit. These little twists on the gameplay, and they're ever so subtle, really make it different, but then the core objectives are also different. Sometimes, like I said, it is just defeating the Mongols. Other times it's freeing hostages. And I just think those simple twists do so much for the game. I mentioned in my impressions that another example was being able to blow up the black powder caches aboard the ship. The reason this is all important is because these objectives that they do aren't necessarily super complex, but they inform a lot of the level design. You're going to navigate a docked ship a lot different than a farm compared to a Mongol camp. And so while I don't think a lot of people would agree, but I at least view it as like these two games are cut from the same cloth. It's the way you approach the game design that makes Ghost of Tsushima stand out a little bit more. I have a lot more I love about Ghost of Tsushima I'll talk about in a sec, but if there's one thing that I got to get off my chest that I feel was a missed opportunity, Sucker Punch has done a great job with morality systems in the past with all of the Infamous games. I adore the Infamous series. I would have loved for them to take that morality system here into Ghost of Tsushima, because Ghost of Tsushima, at least, we don't know where Yotei is going to go, but Tsushima was about Jin Sakai kind of either being this brave samurai where you face down your enemy. I mean, the game literally can allow you to challenge people to a standoff, for God's sakes. So you could either be the character that stares your enemy down and takes them out with your blade, or you hide in the shadows and you're kind of labeled as a wuss. Now, Infamous does a really good job of kind of tying these actions you take to your karma and in turn building out your power wheel. It felt like Ghost of Tsushima was tailor-made for that approach. And I won't spoil when, but there's a moment you make a choice and I'm like, where was this all game? It feels so perfect with the moral dilemma that Jin is in. So perfectly tailored also to this environment, this setting, everything, where I was like, this feels like a great place for some sort of like moral system, and they didn't do it. It's the one thing that I hope Yotei does include, but Yotei is a different protagonist, a different story. I don't know if she'll have this same sort of conflict internally, but I felt like Ghost of Tsushima was a bit of a miss on that part. I love the story for Tsushima, just to be very clear about it. I really do. I just feel that choice could have put the game on a whole other stratosphere, like all-time great for me if they just did that, because everything else surrounding it is good. Like, it's a fun open world to roam around in. It's beautiful. The objectives are great. And then there's things I appreciate now that I didn't get to appreciate back then. When Sucker Punch announced that they were doing the Kurosawa mode, I've admitted this before, I am not a movie guy. However, that's changed in the last year. Thanks to Retro Rewind, my good friend Lockmort kind of gave me the nudge I needed with the start of that channel. Now, we've since then winded it down, but I'll have you know, I've continued to watch movies. I just saw Mickey 17, for example, in theaters. I'm trying to keep up, y'all. I'm trying my best, but it meant that growing up, outside of like your Star Wars, your Marvels, and a couple of other movies, you'll be like, wait, you saw It's a Wonderful Life? Like, you'd have that conversation with me where you're like, you haven't seen anything, but you've seen that. I basically missed out on so much, right? So I say all of that to put into frame that Kurosawa was a director I was not familiar with. I just saw this black and white mode that had film grain on. It was like, interesting. But now I've seen Seven Samurai, and that is one of my favorite movies. It's extremely long. I know the intermission in the middle helps a lot, but it's still an extremely long movie. But you really come to love these characters by the end of it all. And knowing that it's all real, what you're seeing basically, like there is no special effects or anything, and you actually have like horses stampeding through a village. There is just something that builds your appreciation of that movie, combined with the visuals. Again, really good character development, and you know, just by the end you feel sad about a couple of things. Just a great movie. So going back now and firing up Kurosawa mode, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I know I'm late to that party, and you can make fun of me, but I was like, oh, this is great, man. I just love, number one, what it does to the visuals. That much you can see, and I saw back then, but wasn't able to fully appreciate. But it's also how they kind of changed the audio a little bit. Like, they hollow it out, they dull it down a little bit, and kind of accomplish that movie feel with it. I mean, I already thought it was a real love letter to Japan when I played it for the first time, but you fire up the Kurosawa mode, you're like, man, they get it. Sincerely, when you look at like how Japan, at least as I'm recording this, I don't know what they say, but they're like preparing to issue some sort of statement on Assassin's Creed Shadows versus Tsushima, which was like so dearly loved in Japan, just shows how deep that respect well can go for a creator. So yeah, long way of just saying, like, the Kurosawa mode I got new appreciation for, and it kind of changes how you play the game a little bit. You know, I noticed that obviously when you see the glimmer on the sword, this is the visual language that tells you you got to dodge. You're not going to deflect this one. However, that is the color red. When you have Kurosawa mode off, you're just looking for the glimmer, and that is really it. Something that I didn't really connect the dots on until I flipped on Kurosawa mode. So props to them for making this work. The only problem I had with Kurosawa mode is like all the menus were also in this same filter. So I would have appreciated if the menus were all still the same as they typically were, and then the game itself was running that black and white, but we're nitpicking at this point. There were other open world objectives that I thought were just very different for their time. I don't know if when Yotei comes around, if they do this kind of same random grab bag of like, here's your fox dens. Here, you can take a bath. We're not going to show this on screen because I don't want to get demonetized. You can cut bamboo down, and you have to do pretty much a quick time event for it. The duels and so on. And of course, there were side stories that you could take on, which were like the main flavor of attraction. And most popular was writing your own haikus. You know, that was just like, what? There's this open world objective that's just downtime. You know, that's so against what common game design does. Like, Even something Shadows does is like, they say, hey, you're going to go to this temple. You're going to hold the left trigger and observe the lost pages, the tomes that you find, and add them to your codex. It's a little, it's a little streamed down from an already downtime focused exercise that Ghost of Tsushima started. But the main reason I have such strong nostalgia for this game is I remember when I was playing it and going for the Platinum Trophy, all my friends were too. And this was after Persona 5 Royal came out, of course, which, for those who don't know, was the game that inspired me to become a developer. And I say all of that because when my friends and I started putting ideas on paper for what kind of game we would want to make, we were all playing Ghost of Tsushima. So I just remember like jogging around that world and idea jamming, and just, I have a connection to the game because of that. I always think of that phase of my life where, I mean, here we are years later really working on it. And I'm like, wow, it started back then just in a Discord call playing Ghost of Tsushima. Like, what a crazy kind of story that is. I wonder how many games do start off that way. We're just like guys or girls are just like playing games and idea jamming. They're like, let's go for it. Like, why not? And they end up releasing something. Like, I think there's something just really interesting about that, but nonetheless, it's why I have nostalgia for such a recently released game. The last thing I wanted to talk about was one of the surprises that came after the launch, though, and that was Ghost of Tsushima Legends. So after the game was already extremely well received, here comes this full-on multiplayer mode. Now, if you told me before launch that Ghost of Tsushima was going to get multiplayer, I think just given how I was already looking at the game before playing it, I would have been really confused as to what exactly Sucker Punch was doing. I was like, you're making this samurai game and you're doing what, a multiplayer mode? But it works. I mean, it's basically a horde mode, but it's a complement to the very sound combat in the game that you can break up these characters into all different play styles. Like you have in the base game, the moon stance, the stone stance, the wind stance, and so on. But now you break up those elements, all of the different gadgets Jin can get into these different classes, and everyone kind of has their own benefit on the map. I'm not going to sit here and tell you all like I grinded it, but for a free-to-play add-on that just kind of came after an already extremely successful game, it just was icing on the cake. You want to talk about goodwill, that's how you build it. Like, hey, here's this thing you probably could have easily sold as an expansion and still said it was worth it, but to just give it out for free, I mean, what a fantastic end to the PS4 generation when you really look at it. Like, this was also a game that was buried directly behind what many people were talking about at the time, before all the leaks, by the way, before things got out of hand. And that was The Last of Us Part 2. So Ghost of Tsushima just wasn't getting as much buzz until things ramped up very quickly for them during and after their launch. Also, all the cosmetics that they have in the campaign work really well here in Legends, so it kind of gives you this unlock path. There are ranks for your characters. Again, just totally robust, like totally well thought out. And I imagine the goal was to be like, internally, let's ship this all together. But then I guess they just decided, let's keep quiet and we'll actually ship this when it's ready. And what a great, whoever made that call to keep it low key, give them a raise, because it gave them such a bigger push than they already had at that point in time. And I think has propelled a lot of the excitement for Yote, which, especially after Shadows, like, I'm just curious. It's so rare to have this moment where, like, you have Ghost of Tsushima arrive, for me, delivering the sort of Japan-focused Assassin's Creed-style experience I was looking for. Then 5 years later, you get Shadows, and in that same year, you're going to get the sequel to the game that stepped in front of Ubisoft and did what they were waiting to do for far too long. That is such an interesting, unique story in gaming, and so I'm really just looking forward to Yote from that angle of like, wow, these two titans are about to go head to head this year. What's it going to look like? But also with Yote is like, how do you one up yourself? Like, one of the surprises for me is like, oh, Jin's story is done. Like, this is way further in the future. Like, he is out. Wow, I didn't expect that from the rip. Anyway, I'm off topic now. We're talking about Yote. Ghost of Tsushima is still great in 2025. I don't think I need to tell you that, but playing it after Shadows, you just appreciate like the nuance in the objective design and the level design. You of course appreciate its visuals, its color palette. I appreciate my Sly Cooper gear, that's for sure. Little extra multiplayer, never hurt, and so on. There's just a lot here, and I've never played Iki Island. I have to admit, that was the expansion that I'm so bad with DLC, as I'll talk about in like a future video with Shivering Isle. I am so bad with DLC. It is like there's only a select few that I come back around to, but it's so hard for me to reconnect fully in that experience without starting from the beginning. And Ghost of Tsushima on PS5, it was telling me I put 61 hours into it to platinum it. I'm like, I don't want to do all of that again to play another sliver of the game, and it's really hard for me to just dive in cold. But maybe one day I will. But yeah, there's still that as well. And I was playing, by the way, the back compat version, the PS4 Pro version on my PS5, and it still looked excellent. Like, all the gameplay you saw was from that, and I bet many of you couldn't even tell because it just still looks that good. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, just some random thoughts on Ghost of Tsushima on this fine week. You let me know what you're thinking down below. Other than that, I'll catch you all in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.